We import TensorFlow as TF. We then print out what TensorFlow version we are using. We are using TensorFlow 1.0.1. To understand how to use feedDict to feed values to TensorFlow placeholders, we're going to create an example of adding 3 TensorFlow placeholders together. First, we define our first TensorFlow placeholders with the data type being TensorFlow float32. We have TensorFlow.placeholder tf.float32. We assign it to the Python variable placeholder underscore x underscore 1. Next, we define our second TensorFlow placeholder with the same d type as the first one, and assign it to placeholder underscore x underscore 2. Lastly, we define our third TensorFlow placeholder to be the same as the other two. We assign it to the Python variable placeholder underscore x underscore 3. Let's try printing the first placeholder to see what we get. We see that it is a TensorFlow tensor. The name is placeholder ;0, and the data type is float32. Next, let's define the addition using the TensorFlow add underscore n operation because we're adding more than 2 tensors at the same time. So we say tf.add underscore n, and we use a Python list to pass in our 3 placeholder variables, placeholder x1, placeholder x2, placeholder x3, and we assign it to the Python variable placeholder underscore summation. Let's try printing the addition operation to see what we get. So print placeholder summation. We see that it is a tensor. The name is add n ;0, and the data type is float32. Now that we have created our TensorFlow placeholders and addition operation, it's time to run the computational graph. We launch the graph in a session. Then we initialize all the global variables in the graph. Now that the variables have been initialized and the TensorFlow session has been created, let's try printing the result of running our first placeholder variable. So we do print session run and placeholder x1. Yikes! We get an error that says you must feed a value for the placeholder tensor placeholder with d-type float. While we're at it, let's also try printing our operation to see what happens. So print session run placeholder summation. We again get the same error. You must feed a value for the placeholder tensor placeholder with d-type float. So this is what we set out to do with this video. Use feedDict to feed values to the TensorFlow placeholders. The way to feed the values into our tensors is to use a feedDict that defines the values that we want. To do this, we can write the following. Again, we're using the print session run, and we're going to use the placeholder underscore summation operation, and we're going to pass into it the feedDict that says placeholder x1 is going to be the value of 10, placeholder x2 is going to be the value of 20, placeholder x3 is going to be the value of 30. When we run that, we see that we have the value of 60.0 because we have float32 numbers. Finally, we close the TensorFlow session to release the TensorFlow resources we used within the session. And that is how you can use the feedDict to feed values to TensorFlow placeholders.